So, I think we're live. I have no idea how this works. So, okay, so there is a number running, and next to it, it says live. So I guess the stream is running. I'm a bit early, which is on purpose. And apparently we have 5 people watching. That's good. That's a good start. So, and now it's only 3 people. So people start disappearing already. Let me write something in the chat. And the way this works is that yeah, hi Polo. Okay, now people say hi, that's great. So the only way I have feedback here is via your chat. And since this is a Q&A or ask me anything, however you want to see it, the idea is that you communicate with me. So I'm not just sitting here talking. Ideally, the idea is that people actually ask questions. So please feel free to do that. Actually, I have prepared, and I think I can just do that. I have prepared some topics or some ideas what we can do. The first thing is quickly, and I think I want to do this to make this a regular thing, updates on the website. So just, you know, why not just show things that happened the last couple of weeks or days? And then we jump into the Q&A, because that's why you're here, hopefully. If nobody asks questions, or we don't have enough questions to fill the roughly an hour that I've planned, I have some content that we can talk about. But obviously I would like everybody to actually post questions. Actually, that makes me realize I should have my Discord open. Give me a second. How do I do this? So let me for a second turn off my monitor here, because I have to switch it to move to Discord. There you go. Now I'm back. Okay. So we have 2 viewers so far. Less than I hoped for. But maybe give me feedback at least for now. Is everything working? Can you hear me properly? Is the sound okay? Hi, Tech. So can everybody hear me? There seems to be quite a delay between what I'm saying and what's actually going out, which I just have to get used to. Everything is fine. Ah! Hello, Jan Mattis. All right, cool. So we have questions about Solaris. That's great. There is definitely quite a delay. I have to look into this, but that's fine, I guess. All right. Yeah, so since Paulo asks if that is a viable topic, Solaris, yes, actually anything you ask is viable. So you can ask me about, I don't know, why do you decide to wear a white t-shirt? What do you think about the VFX industry? What do you think about AI? What are your plans for the future? What did you have for dinner? What is about Solaris? What about Unreal Engine? What about Blender? I don't care. The idea is that you can ask any questions, and since I'm in the visual effects industry for pretty much 10 years now professionally and 15 years overall, there are more topics than just Houdini that I can talk about, and that's also the idea about this. Of course, Houdini questions are welcome, and we can actually also jump into Houdini if you want, no problem. But Okay, sync is fine, but yeah, we're not limited to Houdini. But if we want to talk about Solaris, we can totally do that. So my question would be about texturing and rendering. Yeah, okay. Because that is, yeah, all right. I would say, I mean, I have to learn how to do this properly, but I would say if you have a question, make it specific so that I can decide if I answer it right away. And I will see if it's about texturing or rendering. And maybe I can write them down on the side to come back to them. Okay, so think about your questions. And again, any question is welcome, also about the industry and stuff like that. So let's start with maybe updates to the website. And what's the best way of doing this? It doesn't matter, just do it this way. So as you might have seen, we have on the website a couple of new videos in the last couple of days. I finally got back into doing some updates. And not only was I recording videos that already existed, but I also was able to update some content that wasn't there before. So for example, just for you to know, because kind of, a summary of the most important things that have changed. Let's make myself a bit smaller. So here in the breaking constraints manually for Vellum, you might remember that. One thing that is pretty cool and that I added is the constraint tag. This is something I actually noticed the other day when I was teaching to a student, where I actually discovered this and I missed it somehow. So usually when you break constraints in Vellum, you have to, when you have multiple constraints, like the constraint of the cloth itself, and then the stitch constraints and all that, when you want to break them, you have to find them first. And usually you can do this via a constraint group that you can set yourself, but that's not, but there are alternatives to that, and that is using variables. Or attributes. And one attribute that we looked at in the video before already was the type attribute. But now it seems like side effects noticed that this is kind of limited, and they actually added, and in the meantime I can actually open a Houdini in the background. They added a constraint tag, which is pretty cool, because that means it comes automatically. As soon as you create a constraint with any constraint node in Houdini now, it comes in with a constraint tag, which simply is the name of the node itself where the constraint was created in. So let's really quickly, let me show you that. So it doesn't really matter what we do. So any constraint, like a cloth constraint, for example. And I found this pretty cool. At the very bottom of your constraint nodes, there is now an attributes tag. And this is set by default to the name of the node. So here, when you look at the output, you always have this constraint tag attribute, and you can't see it because I'm in the way. Here it is. And this is something that is now there by default. So you can always use that to find your constraint. And I found this pretty cool. So I added this to this video. So what else do we have? And I just realized I can't go through everything that matters. It takes too long. But also what I created was finally a video about the attribute adjust nodes. So you might have noticed I used them here and there, because the problem I have with those nodes is usually when I think about stuff, I think about the concept. So for example, if I need noise, I use the noise node. If I need randomness, I use the random node, and so on. But those nodes are coming from a different direction. They say, okay, you want to do something with color, then use the attribute adjust color node, and you can do all kinds of things in it. And I always had a hard time getting this into my brain. But actually, now that I use them more and more, I realize they're super helpful to solve very complex problems. For example, what we see here, spatial-based adjustments to, for example, p-scale here. So definitely watch that video, because there are a lot of cool things in it. And I will try in the future, and I already started doing that, implement the attribute adjust nodes in basically every video, because they, or many videos, because they can be used in so many contexts. And then I finish, I think, with this for now. What also is interesting is I added to the for loops video, finally, a new section about the compiled blocks, because students asked about that. And it's always a bit more for advanced users, but the advantage is that you can, when you know how to use them, and I go through all those small details that you have to be careful about to actually use them properly, then you can speed up your for loops drastically. So in this case, I added those trees one by one in a for loop, and it took 12 seconds to go through all the trees. And with a compiled block around them, it only took 1 second. So massively faster. And this is why it was about time to actually add it to the for loops video. All right, so many of you might already be familiar with this concept, but for newcomers or some of us maybe, it's a nice addition. So those were pretty big ones. Then okay, I re-recorded the pop setup. It was really old, but there is not that much new stuff in it, other than I decided to finally give my particles some color and not keep them black. And besides that, the rest is not super interesting. I mean, it's interesting, but there's not too much very new things that are worth talking about. Okay, one thing I want to talk about, which I find really cool, is in the past, I used, and maybe who follows my Twitter has seen that, there is a website called Otter AI, and they are usually meant for writing down or transcribing meetings that are done, so that people can log what you set in a meeting. So it's an automatic record. Like, you have to record the meeting yourself, but then you upload the audio and you get a text back. Now, the reason I'm telling you that is I was looking for a way to transcribe the videos for a long time, and the results were really often quite bad. So here we're talking about the subtitles. And the reason I sticked with Otter AI and was happy that I found it in the first place is that for some reason they had a very good AI system that gave the best results of all by far. So for example, words like SDF, it actually understood that those are 3 letters and not, making up some other meaning of it. So these special words that we use in Houdini and maybe in VFX in general were found by this website very well, and that's why I used them. And they were relatively cheap, $30 a month, which is perfectly fine for something that, is part of my product here. But, and this is a bit of a morally questionable thing, but I then read about that in AI, yeah, there it is, there is now, as you know, because of the advances in AI, one of the things I found is that the open AI, and I think they are the ones that, oh, I'm not sure, I think they make DALL-E or something, one of the image generators, and they also offer an open source thing that does the same. They they trained it with a lot of audio data and then the transcription to it. And this one is actually so good that it's better than Otter AI. It's free on top, and I can use it on my local machine, which means I don't have to upload my files to Otter AI, which has to be done manually, which is really annoying. But now I have a Python script that I just run, and boom, all the videos that are not done yet are automatically transcribed. And this actually looks like this. I click on a button here, and then it just runs this here. And I just wanted to show you how cool this is. Those are the kinds of scripts that I run in the background to make the website work. And this one I just finished this week, and it does everything now fully automatically. So I just record my videos, save them where they should be, and it checks if something has changed, creates the text file out of it, and then also uploads it automatically on Wistia, which is my video content. So this was a big deal for me because it simplified my my whole workflow quite a lot and saved me money. And I just wanted to share that because I found that pretty interesting from a purely technology point of view. All right, so not sure if that was interesting to you, but I found it pretty cool. So that actually is the stuff that was important the last few days, and yeah, I thought like maybe that's the thing we do. If we do this regularly, we just talk about what has changed on the website or in the background of it. All right, so let's actually go back to the chat and see what happened in the last 10 minutes, because I was just talking. A couple of interesting questions already. Yes, EdPro says the having the search feature is super helpful. Exactly. I was actually surprised about that. Let's quickly talk about this because I found this interesting as well. And that is when you look at the website, then the viewer, people, and this is a bit unfortunate, but people sometimes ask me, can I not improve the video player? And I wish I could, but this is actually the part that I didn't develop myself because that would be way too much work. And I have no experience in that. So this comes from my, if you right click, you can actually see it there, about Wistia. Wistia is the video service I use. And this is kind of interesting for you to know because I had no idea. In the beginning, I tried to use, your classical video services that Vimeo and YouTube, right? But this is not viable for a website like this at all, because first of all, it's extremely expensive, and for some reason that I don't understand, the speed of especially Vimeo was really, really bad. So I got complaints all the time that the video player wasn't working. And before that, by the way, I tried to host the videos myself on my own server that this is running on, but this was completely unusable because everybody basically outside of Europe could not use the service because it was way too slow. So the thing about Wistia, and I found them after a lot of research, and I guess you have never heard of them, so neither did I. And it's interesting because this is this whole kind of infrastructure that happens behind the curtains on the internet. And you have to just find a hoster for your videos that people all over the world can watch your videos in the same speed. So no matter where you guys are from, and I know thankfully you guys are from everywhere, I needed a hoster that can provide high speed to everyone. And while this is not perfect by any means, it's by far the best offer I found so far. So long story short, this is the player from Wistia, and I think it's pretty good. But if you find problems like, okay, it always switches back to low quality and shit like that, I'm sorry, I can't do much about that. And I just want to explain, while I understand that it could be better theoretically, I can't do anything about it because this already is by far the best operator I had so far, and I had to switch 3 or 4 times, and every single time it takes a whole week of full time to move all the videos over and test them and integrate them. So it's a lot of work and it costs a lot of money. So I will probably stick with them for a while because nothing comes even close so far. All right. All right, now maybe one question about the website. Is it possible to extend the text search field in the personal notes field? Oh, that's a good idea. I write this down. Yeah, so whatever you search up here, it also searches the personal notes. That's a good idea. Yeah, that's easy. Good question. Yeah, thanks. Personal notes. That's also, by the way, something we can do here. Totally, I would love to. If you give me feedback, maybe that's the lowest resistance than writing me email or write it by via Discord, which is always a possibility. So personal notes as part of search, that's good. All right, so how did I came up with that actually? Oh yeah, because of the search. So, actually, that's what I wanted to say. Actually, I didn't realize this search video function was there until I actually uploaded my first subtitle and was actually shocked myself that this even exists because Wistia built it in, not me. So maybe you're disappointed now because it was not my idea. But this is those are some of the advantages of having a third-party service for this. They have really good ideas themselves and I can use them. So that's pretty cool. Okay. So So let me see what question makes sense to answer. I worked on Kiddo. Oh yeah, that's true actually. Interesting. The dust sim shot for it. How was it made? Yeah, it was a quick answer without going too deep into it. This was mainly custom velocity field. I mean, the funny thing is back in, a few years ago, basically I did everything with velocity fields because they're so powerful that any kind of movement you want, you can do with velocity fields. And I realized in the course, I'm not using them that much. I talk about them and I use them in a video here and there, but compared to how often I use velocity fields in the job, it's not enough. But then again, it's a fundamentals course. I want to explain first, you know, what other ways are there. And but you're right, I should probably use custom velocity fields more. They just tend to be a bit complicated to set up and very time consuming. And especially for beginners, it's not the best way of starting, in my opinion. That said, in the later videos, you're right, I could use them more. Yeah, a chapter for Solaris for solo artists. That's a good point, Paolo. I actually plan to do this on YouTube because I think that's, you know, I want to keep the content on the website reasonable, because if I think I talked about this before on Discord. It's my feeling that if I push the boundaries of the content too much, then it becomes this willy-nilly, okay, if you talk about this, why aren't you talking about that? And it's not clear what this is actually about. That said, especially Solaris is something that I feel is not properly explained for a normal beginner artist, like you say. It's always explained in the context of companies, and it becomes very complicated very quickly. And especially what bothers me is that it's hard for artists to understand where the advantages lie. As soon as you talk about Solaris in terms of these USD complex, you know, team setups, then it seems more like additional work than any advantage. And actually there are advantages, and there are good reasons why you use it that are understandable for artists as well. And this should be explained in easier terms. And I think that's why I will do it on YouTube. Yeah. Yes. So people agree, more velocity fields. That's a good point. I should do that. I mean, in the future there will be a few more. Don't expect too much, but there will be more practical videos, and there I can probably use the velocity fields more. Yeah. What are my expectations for Houdini 20? Yeah, I mean, a pop sub. Yeah. I'm not so keen about that. I think Flip will be better. So the new Flip system, as you probably have noticed, the new Flip system, I'm not completely convinced. It opens a lot of interesting possibilities, but the problem is you need to understand the same concepts that you need to understand now to use it properly. You need to, and the problem is it's kind of hidden behind those simple nodes that seem to be simple, but the internal concepts are still as complex and still the same mostly as in the old system, but they hide it from you. And this is why I'm not a big fan of it. It doesn't make it simpler, it just makes it more obscure. So when some stuff doesn't work, you have less understanding why it doesn't work and what the concepts behind it are. So I think this has to change. And the second thing, while doing all this, as you've seen, they're always slower than the old system. And that is not a general thing that you can expect from a SOP DOP. Because, for example, the Pyro or the RBD setups, I tested that, just like I tested it with Flip. And they're both actually as fast and sometimes even faster than a manual setup, because, you know, side effects put in some kind of optimization in it. But Flip, in every single case, even the cases where my super slow versions were corrected by side effects support, they are still slower. So even the best case scenario where the side effect support helped me out, it was still slower than the manual setup. And this is why I'm still not convinced that, you know, the current version is an alternative, but this might change. I think they understand that and want to change it. Okay. I mean, I plan to put this online after I looked into it quickly to see if I can actually afford this with my reputation. But the plan is to upload those Q&As on YouTube. So hopefully that people can get something out of it. So what was the other question? Oh, yeah, what else comes in Houdini 20? I really hope that the whole way of working with the viewport will change, because the viewport really sucks in Houdini, the normal viewport. And I think they're already going in the way of trying to solve this overall problem, but in a more holistic way by using the new Solaris environment, because there they have a viewport as well, a normal OpenGL viewport, but this one is a Hydra delegate, meaning it is USD compatible. And I think what they're doing is the same they do with their renderers, so Mantra versus Karma. I have the feeling, and I think that would simply think that would make sense, they do the same with the viewport. And they will integrate the USD system further so that you use it in your normal SOP workflow without noticing, but having something then that is easier to maintain and work on in the future. And then you have the advantage that you can actually build on top of the USD system. And what I also heard rumors about is that they want to integrate, instead of an OpenGL viewport, they want to working on a Vulkan viewport. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure what the advantages of Vulkan per se are, because for me it's just another library, which doesn't mean automatically that the quality will be better. It simply means it's a more widely usable library. But nonetheless, the fact that they're working on a new system tells me that this is the reason why what's currently there is so outdated, because it wouldn't make sense to put a lot of work on an already outdated system when they're already working on a new system. So my expectation is that the whole viewport in general, I think it will be, the normal viewport will become an USD viewport. But besides that, I think we will see some better quality coming in the future. For example, if you ask what's so bad about the viewport in practical terms, first of all, the preview of textures, if you have noticed, if you put in your image textures into the shaders, you cannot actually preview them in the viewport, which is mind-blowing. Even Maya can do this, and Blender, without problem. So this is really weird that Houdini can't do this, which is a massive problem for beginners, but also for everyday, look dev people. And another example is that you have a bad representation of stuff like volumes and particles and all that. So it's really hard to judge from the viewport what you will have later in the rendering, and that is a massive problem. So this I think will be a change. And besides that, I think they will go further in the direction of rigging and animation, because they understand that is a field where they currently don't create any kind of competition to the existing system. In VFX, at least, that means Maya. I'm not sure how successful they will be with that, because riggers do not take Houdini on board, and if riggers don't do that, then animators will not do that either. And people in the industry, maybe who work in the industry here, know the big thing is riggers developed workflows and libraries and pipelines over the last 10-20 years. It's very hard for them to switch to another software. They basically would have to start from scratch, and this is why it will not happen anytime soon, in my opinion. So, but anyway, sorry, the question was, what will side effects do? They will try to go into this market more. If that's a good idea, I'm not sure, but I think that's what's going to happen. And then besides that, well, I always hope that RBD will be replaced. Oh, this is a problem when you use a DSLR as your webcam. But I think, I hope they would replace RBDs with their own more stable system, but I doubt it. What will realistically happen besides that? Not sure. I think maybe some more GPU acceleration. We'll see. Okay, so what my thoughts on AI? I mean, I was kind of expecting that question at some point, and it's very complex. I'm looking into, no, not AI is complex, it is, but the question about it is complex. I'm actually looking into this for a couple of weeks now and thinking about this a lot, and I haven't come to a conclusion yet. First of all, it is scary. I find it very scary. I'm honest about that. I'm not pretending that I'm not, influenced by it. I am scared. That's why I want to read more into it. If I'm scared of something, I want to understand it better and see how justified my fear is. And currently it feels like it will somehow change our world and our industry and all that, but probably not to the extent that the AI bros think, and also not to the extent that we fear. And there are a couple of reasons for that. It will be somewhere in the middle. And I think it's a good idea to look into it and understand what's possible. I actually agree, even though I don't like that idea, but I think we have to do that. We have to get used to it, basically, to not stay behind. But I also, thankfully, come to the conclusion, I think, that there will not be someone who never did anything in the world of art and all of a sudden be able to replace an artist. That will not happen, because the actual production needs are so much more than just creating something. It's so much more complex than that people who can just type a sentence will not be able to replace people with a lot of experience who actually understand what makes a picture nice. Or, one example for this is simply change parts of it, which is a big problem for AI, changing something that's already there in a very specific way. That's currently not solvable. It's always more or less random. And this is, my short version of why it will come. It will be part of the industry, but not to an extent that we will all lose our jobs. I don't think so. Okay. When do people get their names on the credits? That depends on the company and on the movie and on your position. So it depends on so many parts that it's hard to answer that. For example, certain companies have certain rules. For example, as far as I know, ILM, because they're so big and powerful, they can basically demand a certain amount of people in the credits. And they say, okay, if you don't give us that, well, then we will not work for you, basically. MPC, on the other hand, always, try to please their clients no matter what, as we know, even if it's to their own detriment. And therefore, they have very strict rules who gets into the client into the list, in the credit list, and also those are very strict as far as I know. So it totally depends on the company. And then also it depends on the movie, because if you have only, one company or two companies working on it, which is rare, then your chance of getting into the credits is higher than if 7 different VFX vendors worked on it. So there's so many factors in that there is no general rule, period. The higher you are in the hierarchy, of course, the more likely it is. So if you're a senior, the chance is pretty high. If you're a junior, the chance is lower. And I think that's the best general answer I can give. Yeah, okay, so, but sometimes you're right. Sometimes even seniors are not included, because then it depends on stuff. How long are they on the shot? Are they still at the company when the film is still worked on? If you leave in the middle of a movie, some companies like NPC have the rule that you will not get the credits. All kinds of factors. One thought about this. Personally, I understand that when people care about this, but I'm in this industry for so long now that I simply don't care, because for the simple reason that nobody else cares. So you always have this very optimistic idea that people will sit there and then read your name and be excited, but first of all, they don't know who you are. So if you read a random name, who cares? And then your family and friends, where you actually care about that, they know that you worked on this movie anyway, because you probably told them. So I think there is an abstract appreciation behind that, but in real, actual, meaningful terms, having your credits in a movie, I don't know if that's super important. But yeah, that's a personal thing though. I understand if people think like, okay, hey, I want my appreciation. I worked so hard on this and I want to leave something behind, maybe so that people can read my name in 20 years. I understand that. But all I'm saying is, yeah, I think there are more important things in life than if your name is somewhere in a long list of other people that nobody reads anyway. That's my opinion. Let me quickly go back to the beginning questions. So Paolo, you still haven't answered a specific Solaris question. And the same for Ed Pro. You asked about texturing and rendering. Here's a question. Sorry. Karma topic. Do you know how to set a prim ID render var? No, I don't. I have to look into this. Sorry. I would just have to fiddle around here to answer that question. I don't know. Sorry. The reason is I'm currently looking into Redshift with in a personal project with Solaris. I haven't worked with Solaris, by the way, in the context of my job, and that is because I'm not doing lighting and rendering anymore. So everything I know about rendering currently, of the current state, is purely from my personal projects. Because as an FXDD, yes, you sometimes render stuff, but you don't set up the complex setups that need all the bells and whistles. And for my personal projects, I use Redshift right now, not Karma anymore. I tried it, but the problem is Karma, in my experience, what I've seen is still, yes, faster than Mantra, but still much slower than Redshift. And I decided, okay, it's not the right choice for me to use it on personal projects. I find, for now, Redshift the better choice. But I'm working on another project where I will use Karma because I want to add an explosion there. So this is all, coming. But that's why I don't have such deep knowledge about all the intricate details for now, unfortunately, including Cryptomat in Solaris. Okay, so I think we have answered most of the questions here. What are some book recommendations to understand motion design? I have no idea. That's another thing I noticed from people on Twitter mostly, because the people who sign up on my website, while I obviously welcome them very much, I have no idea about them. For me, they are just a name and an email, and sure, I could Google them, and sometimes I do, but very rarely, because it's it's not my cup of tea to Google my clients or my students, or whatever you call them, my customers. So I only see who's interested in my stuff mostly on Twitter when they like, and then I can click on their face, and then I can see on their Twitter feed what they are doing. And what I noticed is a surprisingly high amount of people on the website are actually coming from the motion design world, which is interesting because I have no idea about motion design. I'm not a motion designer. I'm an FXDD, and that is something, as you know, that I think is very important to make this distinction, because I hate it, especially, this comes from the fact that when you teach in universities, you realize that there are people who get fed so much information from so many directions, and nobody explains to them that those are actually different directions. So this is why I became very sensitive about this. It's very important to me that first you separate the different areas of CG. This is why it's one of the first videos. And secondly, when I don't know anything about a particular field, I say so. I hate it when people make guesses about other industries they're not working in, because every industry is so different that it's really problematic if you make claims about another industry you never worked in. And the internet is full with this. Full with people who have no idea what they're talking about, just so that they have something to talk about. And I try to make it a habit to only talk about stuff where I at least think I know something about, and motion design is not one of them. So I have no clue about any book recommendations for motion design, because I don't do motion design and I'm not a motion designer. Although I'm happy that so many motion designers find my course helpful. Yeah. So this is something to keep in mind. Be careful with taking me as a source about anything that has to do with motion design. I'm not a motion designer. Same, by the way, with games. I don't know shit about the games industry. Sure, I get stuff here and there. I even know people working in the games industry, some of them pretty well actually, but that's not enough to claim you know anything about it. And this is why I'm very careful. Just like I hate it when game people are talking about VFX and then come to completely wrong conclusions based on their knowledge, I will not do the same about games and motion design. So 40 minutes done so far. It's not too bad. As people who know me and people who had live sessions with me before know, I can easily talk a lot about random stuff. Here's a question. Do you think it's a bad idea to mix effects shots and motion design stuff together in a junior effects reel? Depends. I would say the general rule I think is try to be as close in your reel to the job you want to do as possible. And that doesn't only mean motion design and effects, it also means even if you want to be an effects TD in the visual effects world, like I am, even in there are different worlds. There's commercials, there is TV or Netflix and stuff like that, so episodic we say, or series, TV series, or streaming, and then there's movies. And those three big areas have some overlaps, but some of them are very different. So for example, commercials, if you have in your effects TD reel, in your junior reel, a lot of explosions and very cinematic shots, then you're actually not that interesting for commercials. I mean, that's not true. Probably people will still hire you because of the quality, but if you want to have a job as a junior, it's a better idea if you want to work in commercials to make shots that you would actually do in commercials. And one example of this, and I learned this in 10 years, I wasn't aware of this myself, even though I worked in all those fields myself. One example for this is in the 5 years I worked in commercials, and occasionally still do, there was not a single destruction shot. Destruction is something that simply doesn't happen in commercials. And I mean, sure, maybe you've seen 1 or 2 in your lifetime, but it's extremely rare. And the reason is obvious. They try to sell something to you. So there is no place for destruction. And this is very interesting. I realized that they think in different kind of elements of what they're doing. It's always nice and it's always comfortable and it's always inviting, whereas in movies it's very often the opposite. It has to be grungy and dark and brutal and destructive and all that. So yeah, the general tip is I would say concentrate on what you want to do in your reel. Now, does that have to be a bad thing if you do otherwise? Not necessarily. If the quality is high, then people will like that. And talking about motion design, if you have a little bit of motion design in your effects reel and you want to go into commercials, then it's actually well perceived probably, because commercials have more motion design here and there involved as well, unlike movies and streaming content. So it can actually be a good thing, thinking about it, if you want to go into commercials. If you want to go into movies and TV, then I would say it depends. I would have to see the reel. By the way, maybe not for today, but next time, and I plan to do this regularly, you could, if you want, if you feel like it, we could live look at reels and I could give feedback if you want. Of course, it's a bit dangerous, so to say, if you want to call it, because you expose yourself to everyone. But at the same time, I wouldn't have a problem with giving feedback on it if you feel like this is something you want to do. And there is no, well, on the Discord you could ask for it and I would probably give feedback. But if you want it more here live and see directly my reaction, then you can have that too. Okay. Any more questions? I mean, it tells me that there are 6 viewers right now. I don't think that's true. I think it's more. But anyway. One thing I want to come back to in the book recommendations. One book I would recommend when you want to work in the VFX industry is, people always ask me for books. Most of the books that I've read are pretty boring. And because of that, I didn't find them very useful. But there is one here. You've probably seen that before. Yeah, okay, it doesn't matter. Let's do this one. Yeah, here. This one. Wait a minute. This one. Inside VFX from Pierre Grage, I think. Because he's French as far as I know. And this is really entertaining, and also it gives you an interesting view on the visual effects industry that you probably didn't have before. So this is why I recommend it usually. I'm not saying there aren't other books that are good. I'm just saying that is a book that I remembered. And the problem with books in the at least in the visual effects industry, again, because that's the only industry I know anything about, is that books are outdated so quickly that almost nobody who has something to say in the industry would make books, because it wouldn't make sense, because the medium isn't practical for what we're doing. That said, this one was about soft skills, not so much hard skills, and this is why I found it interesting. When it comes to hard skills, I think the internet is a better source, and yeah. But because someone said books, this is something that just came to mind. Is it possible to share how much does a normal commercial cost? I have no idea. This is something to keep in mind. You cannot, when you work in a company, a commercials company, even if it's small, you don't know much about the monetary things that are involved. And sometimes the more you rise up in the career, you hear more about it, and that is the case, but I have no idea what a normal commercial costs. It's not. What I do know is that you have to account roughly. I mean, it's sometimes more, sometimes less. But what I heard is $2,000 a day it costs for the client to use a senior artist. And not because a senior artist costs that much, I'm not earning $2,000 a day, but because everything that is involved in that, so IT, the rent of the building, the producers that produce the project, so the whole costs I heard are calculated as around $2,000 per day per artist to the client in commercials. What that means for the overall budget is hard to say. I don't know. A friend of mine who is a producer could probably give you a number, but I'm not a producer, so I don't know. Are there many VFX TDs or other VFX artists that freelance? That depends on the country. So as far as I know, it's more common in the States and also in Germany, interesting enough, than it is in London. The real reasons for that I can't fully explain to you, but there is no general rule for that because it depends on the country. That said, what I usually recommend is when you are a beginner or you have no experience in a particular field professionally, then becoming a freelancer is a bad idea. So yes, the freedom you have and all that is great, but the problem is you have no network and you have no clients. Nobody knows you exist. And you have to understand that those people are not just Googling someone, because we're talking here about, costs of, I don't know, $10,000 a month for a single artist. So we're talking about a lot of money that is on the line. And for a project, you need multiple of those people. So I don't know, I'm just saying something. A mid-sized project probably costs $100,000 a month, around this level. So people who have to spend this kind of money don't just Google people. They don't just randomly look for them. They always trust the network they built over many years, and producers ask other producers, what is a good senior artist that you worked with before, and so on. So this is why I would never recommend starting as a freelancer without already being in some industry, doesn't matter which one, for many years. Only then you start to become a freelancer. And because of that, in the realms of the senior effects TDs or senior VFX artists, it's more common to have freelancers. But since a huge group of the industry are juniors and mid-level artists, you will find less there, way less. And this is why the overall amount of freelancers is smaller compared to the amount of staff people or contracted people. So I would say roughly, I have no idea if this number is true, but from my feeling, what I see around me or what I saw in London, especially, I have to say that my experience mostly comes from London. 80% of people are on contract, so long-term, 1-year contracts, so more or less like staff, and only 20% are freelancing. That's roughly what I would say is my feeling. Yeah, so basically, yeah, that's the answer of the second question. Because of the nature of the work, it's usually full-time. Yes, I would say so. But again, I'm talking, my experience again comes from the visual effects industry, commercials, TV, and movies, but VFX. So I'm not sure how it is in motion design. I'm not sure how it is in games. I'm not sure how it is in, I don't know, medical visualization. I want to be clear about that. And also, I'm talking, my experience also comes from London. So you have to unfortunately be very narrow well, I have to be narrow when I answer this, because I noticed that, you know, there is not one general rule for all CG everywhere in the world. There are very big differences between those fields and those areas. Do you have hobbies apart from doing VFX? Yeah, gaming. I mean, like everyone, really. To be fair, I'm not gaming that much because I'm so busy all the time with stuff that gaming is something I would love to do more. But if I'm lucky, I can do it maybe 3 or 4 hours a week. So I would say gaming is my hobby, but in reality, I do it so rarely that I mostly watch videos about it online, and not playthroughs or something, but more like news and reviews. I really like that. And also, of course, my pile of shame on Steam is ridiculously big. So I probably only play 10% of all the games I own, which is stupid, but I think that comes from the wish to be able to play that I can't afford actually to do. Music, I was, many years ago, almost 20 years ago, I was a drummer, but I haven't touched a drum set for 15 years. So this is no, I'm not doing music. What another hobby I do have is history. So which is not an active hobby, right? I'm not doing history, but I read a lot about it, and I visit a lot of when I'm anywhere, when I'm traveling, it's always history. I'm not interested in any city, for example, that doesn't have history. For example, that's why I personally find Canada unbelievably boring, especially Vancouver. Even though people love this city, I find it the most boring city in the world because it has no history. There's nothing to look at except beautiful landscapes. Yes, but since I'm not very a sports person, I'm a nerd. I'm very much into old buildings. So Rome would be a city I love, or London I loved for that reason. It's filled with history. And in Germany, everything I would visit, now that I live in Berlin, everything I would visit is based on, is there history behind it? So yeah. Will you be at the FMX again? Yes, every year. If I can, if there's no very heavy reason why I'm not at the FMX, which would be, for example, a worldwide pandemic, then I'm at the FMX every year. There's no question about it. FMX is a given. Partly, one, because I enjoy it so much. B, because I have a regular talk there. So a talking round that we organize every year for almost 10 years now. And second, because I meet a lot of friends there, because the FMX, if people don't know, it's near Stuttgart in Germany. And to my knowledge, is the biggest VFX for sure, the biggest VFX and animation expo in Europe. So it's worth, when you're in Europe, to visit it. It's not by far as big as SIGGRAPH, but for Europe, it's a really big one. And since I studied there, very close to it, only half an hour away from it, and the FMX is actually organized by the university I went to, I always have a very personal connection to that. So this is why I go every year. You can count on that. Drop your Steam username. No, I won't. Unless you can write to me via Discord if there's one particular game that you want to play with me, and the chance that we play the same game is almost zero. So before you ask, currently I'm playing Space Haven, which is an indie game where you can organize a little space station. And I noticed when I became older that I don't like action games that much anymore. I played Days Gone before. That was fun. That was entertaining, even though it's pretty, streamlined. But generally, I like games where make a move and then I can just look at it for 10 seconds before I do the next move. I need something that is relaxing. So this is why I like Space Haven. This is why I'm playing right now. And also, Civilization, these kind of games. I understand why people like action games. For example, I played Cyberpunk 2077, and enjoyed it quite a lot. But this is the exception. I like slower games because I'm old. That's the truth. So let's quickly, because there are no more questions coming currently. Maybe next time. What I wanted to talk about, maybe because I thought it's maybe interesting, is what the story behind Houdini-course.com is, why I created it, and what came before, and probably you people know about the Houdini-blueprints.com. This kind of story I will maybe talk about next time. That's a good idea. So I can tell you what we do next time so that you have a reason to come. Then maybe some plans for the future. One of the parts why I'm doing this here is I want to kind of grow a little bit, because the big problem with the website is PR. So I just today actually I wrote an email from a student or customer, or how you want to be called actually, client, fans, how you want to be called. I don't know. Students, the students fine. I don't know how to call you people who pay. Subscribers. Is that a good word? I don't know. What? Yeah, that's something you can do. Please write me how I should call you people, because I haven't found a good word for it yet. Is it students? Kind of, but some people might not like that. Clients or customers sounds very stupid. Subscribers is like YouTube subscribers. I don't know. Yeah, so my plan is to extend the PR, because I noticed that a lot of people, once they sign up for the course, are very happy with the content, but I have a hard time convincing people to actually sign up, and I have to change that. One of the things apparently is the website itself, which I plan to work on, especially at the beginning, but I'm not good at that really. I'm not a website designer, but giving the people a reason to actually sign up. This is something I want to work on, but also that more people actually know about the website. And YouTube, obviously, because I'm on YouTube 24/7 almost, I have to, start being more active there as well. And that includes, uploading videos about topics that wouldn't fit into Houdini-course.com, but I would share nonetheless, and then I can share it with everyone for free. So yeah, more YouTube is planned for sure, and more PR in general. Then next time we can maybe talk more about career advice, even though I a little bit did it today because I thought like people are really interested in that. And then some note tips and tricks, just something that came up in the last couple of days worth talking about. But there is actually another Houdiniists. Yeah, Paulo, I like that word. So Paulo said you want to be called Houdiniists, but then it's hard for me to pronounce that. And then there's a question: if you would start your own company, would you rather focus on one client with luxury pricing or multiple clients with cheap offering? I have no idea, because I thought about obviously creating my own VFX company, and again, VFX. So I have no idea about the 3D world outside of VFX really. So I wouldn't know what kind of clients exist there, which is not completely true, because I also work a little bit with very interesting with a landscape company. They do landscape visualization. What does that mean? Imagine every country has that. When the state and the government have to build big things like wind parks or and the camera is dying again. DSLRs are not actually made for big webcams, but yeah, that's why this happens. Anyway, governments have to spend a lot of money on highways, for example, or on photovoltaic, solar panels and stuff like that. And obviously they don't spend that without planning it properly first. And to plan it properly, you need a company that does the visualization of it, because you want to see what does it do to the landscape? So a good example for this is, and I found this really fascinating, if there is an interesting castle, for example, in the landscape, you want to put the windmills so that you don't see them when you look at the castle. So you have to find a good spot where maybe there is a forest between the castle and the wind turbines, so that they do not destroy the view on the castle, which I found fascinating. I never thought about stuff like that. And this is what those companies are doing. And I work for them doing some procedural modeling because they figured out that Houdini can do this. So they asked me if I want to do it, and they pay pretty well. So in this regards, I work with other companies, but I decided not to create a company because what I learned from VFX, at least for every company I worked for, having a company in VFX is really, really, really hard. And most of them go down. Actually, talked to a couple of people who started their own VFX companies, had to close them, and then worked as senior TDs again. And all of them, obviously, I mean, it's a bit of a inverted survival bias, but all of them said, don't do it. It's so hard to do because the margins are so low that it's not a good idea to start a company. So that's why I would never do that. And that's why I never thought about what kind of clients I would take. When it comes to myself, I am in the good position that I only take clients that actually, or only freelance for companies that pay the money I want, which is at this point relatively high. But I can afford that because partly because of the website, it brings in enough money that I have, a base income that I don't, starve. So that makes it much, much easier to say no to companies. And the funny thing is, you might have heard that before, as soon as you are in the position to say no, companies can feel that and you become more interesting to them because they realize, oh, this person needs to have a reason he or she can just say no. They must be good. So it's absurd. The people who don't need the money necessarily are the ones who earn the most. Absolutely absurd, but I guess that's how capitalism works. So yeah, quite interesting. Yeah, landscaping company. Sorry if it wasn't clear. Landscaping company not landscaping in that sense, but more like landscape visualization. And again, this has nothing to do with gardening or something. This has to do with positioning certain big buildings in the landscape. That's what it's about. I'm not sure if there's a better word for it, probably. So yeah, Life After Pi is an obvious company that went down, but I'm also talking about much smaller companies that you never heard of. They exist as well. Actually, it's quite interesting when you're in the industry and just look around. There's so many small companies with only 5 to 10 people who do the odd commercial here and there, and they can survive. But yeah, this kind of stuff exists quite a lot, but also they go down quite a lot, and this is why I wouldn't want to do it. Do you know any good VFX or industry-related podcasts? Unfortunately, not. Nah, well, there's one I always recommend, one source in general, that's called, and it's Alan McKee. I find, and it's a bit problematic to say that publicly here, but I find him a bit as a person hard to listen to because he has his kind of, the way he talks is very different to how I think I'm talking. So yeah, okay. So if you listen to him, you will know what I mean. But this guy really knows what he's talking about when it comes to business. So this is why I would probably say Alan McKee comes to mind. He has a podcast, and I think this one is a really good one. Again, Alan as a person, I have a hard time getting warm with, even though I'm sure he's a super nice guy. It's just that his kind of, the way he talks is just doesn't match with me, that's all. But the information is definitely super damn valuable. So I can absolutely recommend Alan McKee. So why create VFX from scratch if one can just comp a pre-made VFX board? Oh yeah, well, there are many reasons for it, because not every pre-made VFX will fit in the case that you need. So I mean, if you can get away with board elements, then that's fine. But I assume you come from an area where this is working, but in my experience, having pre-built assets or elements for your comp and just put it in somewhere is not even remotely enough for the level of quality a lot of fields expect. So for example, in a Netflix series, that wouldn't work, or in a movie that simply wouldn't work. For example, as an example, magic effect that comes out of a hand and is thrown towards someone specific. It depends on the camera angle. It depends on the movement of the hand. There's so many elements that have to fit to make it 100% believable. And, you know, this is a completely different level of quality than what you see on YouTube, for example. So it highly depends on what area you work in. And I would say generally, if you can get away with cheap solutions, then that's great and there's nothing wrong with it. But there are areas where the client expects something else for good reasons. And if the VFX, for example, in a Netflix series wouldn't be up to par with what the rest are doing, then people would complain about it. And that is why it's worth spending, I don't know, 10 times more, 20 or 50 times more than the cheapest alternative. So there's not one size fits all. The opposite is true as well, by the way. So beginner often compare themselves with ILM, and I always say that's a bad idea, because ILM is kind of or Weta. It's a top notch. It's world class. There's nothing better out there. And if you compare yourself with that, you create an unrealistic expectation to what's possible for you, and also what other people expect of you. So an example is a junior effects reel. Nobody expects the quality of an ILM reel. That's insane. Like, how is that supposed to work? And I see this all the time from juniors, that they take this as a bar. And there's nothing wrong with setting high bars per se, but if your bar is too high, you don't do yourself a favor. And comparing yourself as a junior with ILM is a bad idea. That if that would make sense, then ILM wouldn't exist. Think about that. If a junior could create the quality of ILM, how could this company survive even a month? That makes no sense whatsoever. So yeah, context, I think, is always important. What do you create something for? What are the expectations and what are your resources? And then come to the conclusions what you do with this in terms of quality, techniques, workflows, and so on. This is why it's always a bit hard to give generalized advice without knowing the specific context. Yes, he's the 3ds Max guy. That's true. He's not good anymore for a long time, actually. We're talking about Alan McKee here, sorry. There's always a delay. Sorry that I come back to older stuff. Alan McKee is not good for hard skills. He's out of the industry for so long that even though he's capable of creating content, the workflows and the software that he's using is so outdated, I would not recommend anyone learning hard skills from him. But he has a huge amount of soft skills that will not go away. So how do you make yourself interesting for companies? How do you handle overtime? How do you handle, I don't know, personal life with work balance? All these kind of things. How do you, what are the best steps to advance your career? Those kind of things. He has a lot of very, very good advice. And if I wanted to boil it down to one sentence, and I think he's absolutely right in that, you have to understand you are a product. That is something actually I'm teaching in university sometimes. That has nothing to do with the website. But once you understand that, even as a CG artist, so to say, you are a product that you have to sell. You have certain people who want something from you, and you have to sell it. Once you understand that, and that you, for example, are following demand and what's the opposite? That's me being German, not always finding the words. Demand and supply. Demand and supply. So in the world of CG, you're always selling something that has a demand and a supply. And it's not just, oh, I'm doing fancy stuff, therefore people will hire me. It's not that simple. It's way more complex than that. Is there actually a market for it? Or on the other way around, if there is a market for it, maybe even if my stuff isn't super fancy and good, you know, it's possible that I will be able to earn a lot of money because there are not that many people doing that. So understanding the rule of demand and supply when in your career is extremely important. And this is what basically Alan McKee is constantly talking about. Any thoughts on Avatar 2? I haven't seen it yet. What that was all was it all beta? I don't know actually. Before I say something wrong, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's 100% beta. I wouldn't be surprised if there were more companies involved, because often those companies aren't allowed to say it. So it's possible that it was too much work for Weta, and then they outsourced parts of their work. But often part of those contracts are that those companies are not allowed to say that they worked for Weta or that they worked on that movie. So I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that's why we don't know. I can't say for sure. And I also didn't look into it, so I have no idea. Is it impossible in the future sessions you can look at some effects and talk about their breakdown? Yes, theoretically yes, but then we end up like corridor crew, and I don't like that very much, because the problem with that is that is fair. I could talk about how I would approach them. I think that's fair, but I wouldn't like to specifically break them down and kind of reflect on them, because I think that's problematic, because then you end up doing what Corridor Crew is doing, and I don't like that. Did you ever think of making a VFX podcast? Yes, actually, now that you say that. A good friend of mine who now works in the in the games industry, he wanted to do a podcast for a while, and we actually already started meeting via Zoom, but then, you know, time was a problem. So interesting that you asked that, because maybe we'll think about this again. Next week, actually, I meet him. Maybe I can remind him of this. Let's see how much time he has. It's always a time problem, right? And keep in mind, let's be honest here, as you know, I don't like bullshitting. Money is important. So I'm not doing much of what I'm doing purely for the enjoyment, even though a lot of it is fun. I am very aware of that. I want to earn money, and I will not lie about this, because I think it's dishonest to do that. Part of what I'm doing here, and why I totally enjoy this right now, and it's great that you don't have to pay anything for it, and I hope you enjoy it too. Let's be honest, I do this to widen, hopefully, the potential audience for my paid content. Let's not bullshit ourselves about that. I'm saying that because making a podcast is always a bit problematic, because it's potentially a lot of work with little feedback. In terms of monetary feedback. So I honestly have to think about what my time is worth, and therefore not everything I would like to do, I can do. Let's keep it at that. You enjoyed the State of the Industry talk last FMX. That's great. You could listen to that for hours. Yeah. Maybe I do some kind of that. I mean, again, I plan to do stuff on YouTube, so maybe I can do more like that on YouTube. That's definitely the plan, because I think YouTube is more a good stage for talking about the soft stuff, not the hard stuff. Canada Dry said something. Where is it? Is it? Yeah, right. Yes, I answered that. Yeah, okay. Let's come back to the question from Canada Dry, because AdPro answered that. Right. So it's not about VFX artist react. Exactly. You mean more like, okay, let's say I wanted to do something like that. What would be my thought process? That's a good shout. That's a good idea. We can do this. I mean, here's the thing. The more you put into these kind of sessions, the more the easier it is for me to react to them. So if you prepare for next time a particular effect and bring it with you, and then just post it and say, hey Chris, how would you approach this? As you can tell, I try to answer every question, and I enjoy answering questions actually. Then, you know, I don't have to prepare anything, I don't have to plan anything, I just do it. So if you want something, just bring it next time, and then the chances are pretty high that I will just follow your order, basically. Okay. All right, guys, I think this was a lot of fun, but you can see on my face I'm getting reddish. because it is a lot of work to constantly talk, especially about stuff that you haven't prepared, but just on the fly. So I would say, because there are no more questions anyway, let's finish for now. And I think that was quite enjoyable and successful. And I plan to do this more regularly. Maybe not next week, because next week is Christmas. I doubt that I will do this, but certainly next year I have big plans to do more stuff like that. Yeah, and here's the question: how frequent I plan to do this. I mean, I would say my guess right now is every 2 weeks, maybe even every week. I'm not sure yet, but every 2 weeks for sure, and then see how it goes. So yeah, this delay annoys me a little bit. I have to look into this, why there is this massive delay, because I can't answer questions directly when they come up. But anyway, so yeah, thanks very much, everyone. I think that was fun. Let's stop here, and I hope you have a great weekend. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me on Discord, because there I'm quite active too. So I would say see you next time when we do the next session. Thanks very much, and see you later. Cheers.